Welcome to Bottle Rockets with Alena, your top hockey podcast. Welcome back to Bottle Rocket. We have Maeve, who is going to appear shortly, Teabag. And our guest, Joe Rossi, is the author of Remembering the Long Island Arena, a hockey story and more. And he's donating all proceeds to the Sabrina Navarrete Memorial Foundation, which supports parents who've lost a child. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Very happy to have you here. So, Joe, what moment made you say I have to write a book about the Long Island Arena?
Well, my first book was called A Stick in the Window, and it was by basically the biography of Buzzy Dishaw, who was a player for the Ducks. But Buzzy, of course, was all over the hockey map. He played minor league hockey. He ended up, after his hockey career was over, he was an executive for Coho. So he got to know all the trainers, and it was a very interesting story. He had connections all over, which made it fun. Of course, then I was able to talk to Willie O'Ree, who was a teammate of his, and a bunch of other players. Brian Trottier actually wrote the foreword to the book. But to me, because Buzzy only played 2 years with the Ducks, or my team when I was growing up, that was the team that I loved to go watch. I felt that I needed to almost continue on and look at the Long Island Arena and how the whole history of it. There's been plenty of stories about the Long Island Arena, but a story here and a story there, never a complete picture of the history of the arena. So that's what I kind of wanted to do with Remembering the Long Island Arena, this book here. And again, as you said, I'm donating the proceeds to the Sabrina Navarrete Foundation, which supports young children with scholarships and also support parents who have lost a child. So,
Hi.
Hey, Maeve.
Sorry, did I?
Hi, Stan.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good, very good.
Have you guys?
Yeah. Joe has just started telling us about his book, Remembering the Long Island Arena, and the foundation that he's supporting. What got you into supporting this foundation?
John Navarrete, her father was a hockey player at a rink near me. And of course, I heard about it. He's on Long Island, like I am on Long Island. And I said to Buzzy when I was doing this book, I wanted to do it for charity. Not that I'm independently wealthy or anything like that, but I thought to myself, I'm not doing this for myself. I'd really like to have the proceeds go someplace that's worthy. And Buzzy brought me to their attention, and it's worked out well. We're having a book signing on Thursday.
That's incredible. Congratulations on their book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My mother would be proud after all those trying to get me through my spelling lessons, everything else at the kitchen table when I was a kid. She'd probably be laughing about this right now.
I'd like to tell you about another good deed of Joe's, which I consider remarkable. Simply put, about 90 of my hockey library of all kinds of authors, not counting the ones I have with me here in Israel, I had 90 books, and a friend of mine, John Fayol, had stored them away. I didn't realize when I left for Israel that I had a whole bunch of more books there, and they were stashed away, kind of out of the way. And the guy who was my roommate then told me about it, and unbeknownst to me, he took all the 90-odd books over to John Fayol's house, and there they sat, and there they sat, and there they sat. And about 2 years ago, I may be wrong about the time, Fayol told me that he had these books and that he had to get rid of them because they were taking a lot of room in his house. And I decided that they should go somewhere before they wound up in the So Joe, I thought Joe would be the perfect guy because he's a hockey lover and he's an author. And I got in touch with Joe and I said, listen, I got these 90 odd books and you can have them. And I was surprised when he told me that he had a better idea. Well, what could be a better idea than him taking 90 books of all different kinds, from all different authors, including my own? And Joe says to me, instead of you giving the books to me, why don't you donate them to the Islanders in the Stan Fischler Reporter News? You know, they have this exhibit of mine. I thought that was really very gracious of him. And one way and another, we did get the books there. They are now in a nice bookcase. I'm going to get a little bit more publicity for it because I want the the Long Island author. There are a lot of authors in Long Island who've written hockey. Joe being one of them. Another one guy named Greg Prato, who I hope you're going to have on soon, is another great guy, as well as the guys who wrote Fish Sticks, which is a classic about the crazy years of the Islanders when they had about 74 owners. In fact, I was in touch with one of them, and they're doing an update of that book. So we're going to have some sort of follow-up now that the books are there. And the bottom of the line is that if there was a Nobel Prize for generosity, I'd give it to Joe.
I don't know about that, but
What do you mean you don't know about that? First of all, I'm older than you by about 2 or 3 years. And secondly, it's none of your business to tell me what to do. Age 93, right? So, yes, you get the Nobel Prize because you're a great guy, you're gracious, and you're a terrific writer. Okay?
thank you.
Now, I'll let Joe talk, but later I'll tell you my version of his Long Island Arena. Tell him why it was such a crazy place. I mean, the
There
cold
was
water story is a beaut. Tell him that one.
there was so many stories about, the Long Island Arena. As I said, there was so many stories, but they were all fractured. It was, a story here and a story there, but nothing a complete history of it. So I began looking through some archives, and of course, I came up with a little bit of the history of it, which was fascinating. It was Tom Lockhart, Tom Lockhart, who was Mr. Hockey in the New York area long before Gordie Howe was named Mr. Hockey. His idea was he worked at Madison Square Garden. He was the hockey promoter at Madison Square Garden. And he was going to make the Madison Square Garden of the East, which was going to be out in Comac, Long Island, which was a growing population. And of course, he got the finances together. The idea was it would cost around 350,000. Today, you can't get a house for that, let alone a whole arena. And he was ready to put it on. In '56, he made the announcement, and he said it would be up and running by November. November came and went. Another year came and went. Another year came and went. The finances weren't there. And finally, somehow, he got it open. And of course, he started promoting the hockey that was there, the New York Rovers, as they were called. He restarted the Rovers, and it was zany right from the start. The first game, in fact, the Rovers didn't have uniforms yet, so they had to borrow the All-Star uniforms. The game started 15 minutes late because the referee was caught in traffic. This is par for the course. It started right away from the Long Island Arena. And Pat Kelly actually was who the Kelly Cup is named after in the East Coast Hockey League. He told me he played in that first game also. So he remembers it well, but it was one crazy hockey episode after another.
I gotta tell you one that's crazy one, because once the arena was in business, the Rovers became the Long Island Ducks.
Yes.
And the Long Island Ducks were owned by an electrical magnate on the island who was just a great guy. His name was Al Barron, and his wife Renee was a classic. So this was a great date to take a girl out to see the Rovers, because when you sat right on the boards, there was no glass or anything, and pucks would come over the. So I told my friend Jack Goldstein and his wife went out to a game with me, and I said, Ann Goldstein, bring a baseball glove because when we're sitting right on the boards, pucks come over and you might get hit with a puck. So make sure you have a baseball glove from your son Adam. So we go out to the game and we're sitting on right on the boards. And what do you think happens? Puck comes over the boards and whacks Jack's wife in the neck because she forgot that you have to wear the glove, not put it on your lap. She got off easy. She's still alive.
Along those lines, the team doctor was Dr. Ed Weigers. And, uh, for $25 a game and free parking, he was the team's doctor, although he was a pediatrician. And one of the games, his son's running around the rink. Sure enough, a puck comes up and hits him. So the doctor ended up stitching up his own son at the rink because he got hit with the puck. So, you know, what else is new?
Joe, you got to tell him the cold water story. I love that one.
Oh, okay. Pat Kelly, who was the Clinton Comet coach, player coach, of course. They were all player coaches. You save money if you have a player coach, of course. He was talking to me and he said, the thing I hated about that arena, besides the walk into the locker room where you had to actually walk through a crowd to get into the locker room and they were throwing stuff at you and everything like that. He said after the game, there was always cold water in the shower. He says that place never had any hot water. So when the Ducks came up to Clinton to play, of course, what does he do? He tells his maintenance man, shut the hot water off in their locker room. Let those guys take the cold showers.
Yeah.
So that was he
One
said,
more, Joe. Tell him about the perils of being a referee at the Long Island Arena.
oh my gosh, they were not immune to it either. It was the referees. They were targets as much as any of the players on the other team. Bob Giavatti got a bucket of water thrown at him, a fan as he's skating by. Remember, there's no glass. I don't know where they got the bucket of water, but he just hurls it right at the referee. The referee gets soaked. They got to stop the game.
Joe, who is that one character from that barn you still tell stories about and why? Like if you had to think of one person.
I think the great story is the Zamboni driver getting into a fight.
Yeah. With a fan or a player?
This is the only arena that I ever heard of where the Zamboni driver gets into a fight with a fan. But I must tell you my side of the Long Island Arena. And what happened was that the year that I was working for the Rangers, Tom Lockhart was working for the Rangers as the business manager, as well as the commissioner of the Eastern Amateur Hockey League and a few other things. And while I was there, which was the 54-55 season, I actually saw the model of the Long Island, what was going to be proposed arena. And it seemed like a great ideas, Joe. I'm telling you my side of the arena story when I found out that Tom Lockhart, and I saw this looked like a great thing because the Rovers were being pushed out of the Garden by the Knickerbockers, who were making more money than the Rovers. So this was a natural home for the Rovers. And like Joe said, it took years and years and years. And then finally, the Rovers played there 1 year. Eddie Jockman, who's in the NHL Hall of Fame, got his break, first playing for the Rovers and then the Ducks. I remember when it began, and like Joe said, it took years. But the great thing about it, there were great characters. And my favorite character was Al Barron. Joe, you got an Al Barron story?
Yes, I do. Of course, Al, nothing was sacred with Al, of course. But he was the promoter of everything. He was P.T. Barnum of the Long Island Ducks. His wife, Renee, of course, and him started out as fans. And they would sit behind the penalty box. Now, back then, the penalty box was the front row. So Renee and Al would sit in the second row. So when a player came off the ice to sit down, they're sitting right next to them. If the call was charging, Renee would tap him on the shoulder and say, "What's the matter? You didn't have cash? You got to charge?" If the charge, if it was holding, Renee would say, "If you want to meet him that bad, I'll introduce you to him after the game." So this
The
was
ever
Al. The
great
big thing was when Al bought an old DC-3 plane for the Ducks. This was late. This thing was supposedly in World War II. I don't know if there were any bullet holes in it, but it was Dwight Winters, who played on that team, said to me, he said that thing was not real reliable. One time they were flying from Charlotte to Florida. He said, Dwight said to me, we weren't 10 feet off the Gulf of Mexico. He said he was looking out the window, just waiting to crash, and the pilot Pete was the pilot for that one. He landed at the wrong airport. He said a couple of guys came out onto the tarmac, went into the cockpit, took Pete out, and that's the last they saw of Pete. So they had a different pilot for the flight holes, but this was Al Barron.
No. Did John Brophy play for that team?
John Brophy played for that team. Yes, John was one of a kind. Brophy, I would talk to from time to time. Late in his life, of course, I would call him up to see how he was doing. Interesting story on Brophy. This is one that's not in the book. When I was in college, I was dating this girl. Things were going very good, and I was going to meet her dad for the first time. And she said, "Oh, he played minor league hockey. His name was David Exley, and he played in that league that you used to watch. So you might want to talk about that to him." So I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, this will be a nice intro." So I said to him at the dinner table, I said, "I knew John Brophy. He was kind of like an idol of mine." Well, the man dropped his fork and knife, looked me right in the eye and says, "That SOB hit me so hard behind my legs, I still feel it to this day when I sit down." So, of course, that didn't go so well. When I told Brof that story, she said to me, "It's nice that they remember you for something."
he was one of the toughest guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, wasn't he the model for Paul Newman in Slapshot?
John Muckler said that, we could have added some things to that movie, and that's for sure. John was an interesting guy, to say the least. You, Stan, I'm sure remember this. He made a beer commercial as a referee. So it was on television. I forget which beer company it was for, but he makes his beer commercial and he's the referee in the beer commercial and he's breaking up fights here and there. The next week, what does he do? He socks a referee, gets suspended for the year. And his only income was the $120 he got each time they ran the commercial.
Well,
Crazy stuff.
you had to be an old-time hockey fan because the Eastern League, where the Ducks played, was an outgrowth of the Eastern Amateur Hockey League, and they weren't amateurs, by the way. You know how that league got the name, by the way, the Eastern Amateur Hockey League? This was Tommy Lockhart, crazy
Tom
Tommy
Lockhart, right?
Lockhart. Tommy Lockhart had a meeting of a bunch of prospective team owners for this new league that they were going to form. And it happened to be in a room that previously was a meeting room for some other league. And it said Eastern, they had the stationery, and it said Eastern Amateur, whatever it was. And he just took the whatever other name was off, and he had Eastern Amateur Hockey League from this free stationery. They weren't amateurs, but they got away with it. They got away with it, and that's how the Eastern Amateur Hockey League got its name. He was a fabulous guy. I'm sure, Joe, you have stories about Tommy.
Well, Tommy, of course, also was in charge of the Rovers, of course, but also between periods, it wasn't like it is today where you have the scoreboard, you have the food courts and everything like that. So he had to keep everyone entertained between periods. And sometimes you'd have a figure skater come out and everything else. And one time the Rovers were playing the Hershey Bears, and he heard about a skating bear, a bear that could actually skate on ice. And it was in New York. So he, of course, contacted the Bears trainer and asked him, does your bear really skate? And oh yes, my bear skates, of course it does. So Tom, of course, he according to Tom, he took a cab up to the Bronx to get the bear, put him in a cab with the trainer and the trainer's wife, and they rode back to Madison Square Garden. And I can't imagine this, but this is a story Tom tells with the bear. So between periods, he's going to let the bear out on the ice. But the trainer says, "Listen, the bear doesn't go out unless I go out there with them." So of course, they have to find skates for the trainer to go out there on the ice. Well, the trainer falls on his face right away. He's got a leash on the bear, and the bear starts skating around, dragging him all over the ice at Madison Square Garden. The crowd's going nuts. And of course, Tom's laughing too. And then Tom realizes, well, how do I get this bear off the ice? And luckily for him, the wife was there. She put two fingers in her mouth and whistled, and the bear came over, dragging the trainer behind him to the rink to get him off the ice.
Well, I heard a postscript on this. There was a little miscommunication in that the bear really was very good on roller skates, but you can't blame the bear. That's
No, no, no.
But I heard that the act, the humor of the whole thing, that somebody else decided to book the bear and might even have been into Hershey.
Well, that I don't know, but Tom, you hear to read Tom tell the story. It was pretty funny. I still would have liked to seen the cab driver's face when they put the bear in the cab.
Only in New York.
Only in New York, right?
Well, the other one that Tom made a kind of a star of back in the 30s. Nobody in America really knew much about Sonia Haney, who was a Norwegian Olympic figure skating star. And when she came to the States, one of her first appearances before a crowd was between periods at a Rover game. And from there, Sonia Haney went to Hollywood and, of course, became a big star, big star.
Mm.
Well, you know what? We have to make a comment now. I don't know. We have to go for the moment, to the present, because speaking of Long Island, a big story was that one of the stars of the Islanders, as many of you know, was suspended for a game. Matthew Barzell missed a bus for a practice, and he was suspended. This was just the other night when had a game in Carolina. And he got suspended for that game. Big story. And the question is, and I want Joe's feedback, did they do the right thing to suspend him, or should they have done something else?
Ooh, I don't know the total situation outside of what you hear that he was late for the team bus. I relate back to a story about Dennis Potvin when Al Arbor was the coach, and there seemed to be a little bit of a problem with Dennis Potvin, where Al told him, be at Racketing Rink, which was in Farmingdale, we're going to start at 5 o'clock. And when he got to the rink, 5 o'clock in the morning, nobody was there except Al and Dennis. And he had Dennis skate for an hour, up, back and forth. And no one else showed up otherwise. So Al, took it into his own hands of how he could discipline him. So I don't know the whole situation with Matthew Barzell, but I'm sure if he suspended him, and it wasn't like they just made him a healthy scratch, they let you know that he was late. So what can you say? I guess this got under Patrick Waugh's skin.
Well, I can tell you the Denny Potvin story because I worked with Denny on his book, Power on Ice. And what happened, he was a rookie and a very well advertised rookie when he came
Mhm.
to the Islanders. He was basically going to be the bedrock of the new franchise. This was the second year. The Islanders were awful in their first year. And then he made a huge impact on the team, but he overslept. And then when he realized, he got in touch with because they had a game in Philly. And Arbor said, just stay home and not, his big brother, with Johnny Park then was already on the team. So this was a double embarrassment. And the Islanders got beat. And as Joe said, Al had him come to the rink, had Denny come to the rink in the morning, and he just tortured him. And then after he tortured him, he had Denny go before the entire team and apologize for that. And it was a traumatic event for Denny. And then it turned out to be a very good one because he learned a lesson. And part of that lesson was how to behave and also how to lead. And Denny became the captain of the team when they won the 4 straight cups.
Mhm.
And he was a great captain. Chico Rest said he was, Chico's year there. He said that years there, he said that Denny was fantastic. So what happened was that Barzell came back last night and he played, and the Islanders went into Washington and they won the game 3-1, and he got the open net goal. So truth is stranger than fiction. And we'll see what happens now. But that lifted the Islanders up to the 500 mark,
Right.
and they're in the midst of the race now. It should be very interesting. I don't know about the Maple Leafs. You got to tell me what's the deal with the Leafs?
Yeah. Oh my God, they always start slow. So I try to put myself in that little delusional Leafs fan state. Honestly, they started the same way last year. I'm hoping they pick up by January. I think they will. Right now, nobody's even watching hockey, anyways. It's all baseball, so I don't think they're too focused on winning just yet.
The crazy thing about the Leafs is that they are, as of today, they are in last place in the Eastern Conference, but they are 1 point out of a playoff spot. So it's that tight. So I think it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, there's a lot of parity in the league. There's not, there are some really bad teams and some really good teams, but all those teams in the middle are so close. So, I think it's going to be a really interesting year. I mean, my Canucks are 500 and out of a playoff spot right now. You just don't know. So, Joe, what do you think of the state of the Islanders right now? Are they a playoff contender?
They're borderline that way. Schaefer is sensational to watch. I mean, he's such a great skater and just a real. He's going to be the future of the franchise, and no doubt about that. He's just I can't believe his age, but as I told Stan, hockey's turning into a very young man's game. I mean, between him, Barad, Celebrini, these guys are really the future of the NHL. So, the Isles have one of them in Schaefer. So, if anything, he'll be fun to watch.
Has 1 point per game or something, right? So far.
Yes, he does.
He's incredible. His story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Honestly, I'm going to keep watching that guy. I really think he's going to be a superstar.
Yeah.
You look at the Schaefer story from the beginning, or at least from his junior playing with Erie. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't make it up. I mean, the person he was billeting with, the family he was billeting with when he was playing in Erie, the woman was a television personality, and been around. And incredibly, she committed suicide.
Yeah.
And of course, what a blow for a kid in juniors. And then his mother gets breast cancer, and it was incurable. And then months later, he's a double blow. Well, you have to understand this guy's personality. He was able to, there's an old expression, sweet are the uses of adversity, and nothing symbolized it more than what this kid was able to do, to take these tragedies, continue to play so well that he became the first overall pick. Now, when they picked him, I remember this vividly. There was a debate, is this kid going to be, what are they going to do with a kid at 18 years of age? But the remarkable thing that I remember, I couldn't believe it, is that he kept saying, I'm here to get on the varsity of this team. And it sounded like he was a blowhard, but he's not a blowhard. He's like the perfect, face of any franchise. You're just a great kid. But then, okay, let's see what you could do. And they bring him to training camp, and the debate's on, should we keep him or should we not keep him? And he was so good that they decided they're going to see what he can do. Now, typically you give him a 10-game tryout. Well, this guy was so good from the get-go that he's now quarterback of the power play.
Yeah.
He's doing always more than 20 minutes. He's usually the guy who has the most minutes. And this is the most remarkable thing. He's handling himself like a pro who's been around for 5 or 6 years. I mean, if Hollywood wanted to have a movie about a hockey kid, and you'd have this script and you'd say, well, this is what Hollywood is making up. This can't be for real. And this kid is for real. Amazing. Amazing. And the other thing was, there's another kid, Joe would know, who was a Long Island kid. And there was a lot of debate. Should they pick the Long Island kid, who I believe went to Boston Bruins, or should they should they go with Schaefer? And of course, the decision was Schaefer is so skilled. Nice to have a Long Island kid. Now they do have a different Long Island kid on the team, but they went for top skill, and Schaefer has it.
Yeah. Yeah, Schaefer's the
Reminds
real deal.
Reminds me of a story of Vincent LeCavalier when he was drafted by Tampa Bay first overall. He was 18 and he got signed and he wanted to buy a Ferrari. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody pulled him aside and said, if you buy a Ferrari, the whole team is going to hate you. And so he listened to the advice. He took the advice. And 3 years into his first contract, he's still driving the same car, which was a Daewoo. I don't know if you know what a Daewoo is, but it's a piece of crap. And so
That's
3 years LeCavalier's career, he's driving a Daewoo.
It's like the gag about Rolls Royce decided to go into the compact car business, and they designed the compact and they called it the Rolls Canardly. And the reason why they called it the Rolls Canardly was because it could roll down one hill, but it can hardly get up the next.
Oh boy.
I think the worst car that came out was the Yugo. The Yugo was a terrible stuff.
Oh, my friend had a Yugo.
Yeah.
They had a cheap version called the Yugo No Go.
Well, they came from Yugoslavia. That's why it was the dictator Tito. That was his idea to start selling the cars worldwide. And yeah, they were as cheaply made as there's actually a club of Yugo owners still active who drive their Yugos every day. And so some of them survive to this day. So anyway, with this Barzal thing, do you think that could be the catalyst for setting the Islanders on? Because I remember one time with our Canucks. Pat Quinn was coaching, and the practice was going, and the players were screwing up every drill. And Pat Quinn took his stick and broke it over the glass, and started. And from that point on, the Canucks went on an unbeaten streak. It was like a month long, and so I'm thinking this is a signal to the rest of the team that no matter who you are, you're going to pay the price if you're not team first. So I think this could be a catalyst for the Islanders doing some good things this year.
What do you think, Joe?
Well, we'll have to see. You remember, like when you were talking about Dennis Potvin, of course, they surrounded him with some pretty good players in the next draft and the next draft. So, we'll have to see how the team develops and how the young players are. It'll be interesting to watch. There's a lot of young teams out there that are fun to watch. I like to watch San Jose. I mean, I know they're not where they should be yet, but boy, oh boy, they got a lot of young guys there that they can fly with Celebrini leading the way. I mean, maybe if they get more young guys, who knows?
Well, you know what? Denny Potvin, not simply when we were doing the book, but much later. He said that Al Arbor was brutal. He didn't use that word, but Al Arbor treated him really harshly. He reined him in as an offensive defenseman, which, of course, everything Al did in terms of Denny made him a great player. But Denny resented that he was very tough on him. And the reason why Al Arbor was tough on Denny was that Al wanted the other 17 or 18 players to see that nobody is going to be treated differently, whether you're a superstar, as Denny was. And Denny understood this, but that doesn't mean he has to take all the guff that Al gave him. But as we all know, the bottom line is that Denny wound up with 4 cuts. And as far as this kid is concerned, they just brought up another young guy, Richie, who apparently is very talented. And we got a couple of others that are coming out of college. So the new GM, Dosh, is a very smart guy.
Okay.
And they're rebuilding. They're rebuilding. People are going to be coming out just to see Schaefer. It's really too bad that we had a beer in Brooklyn called Schaefer. It was a beer that sponsored the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the theme was Schaefer is the one beer to have if you're having more than one.
Yep.
And this Islander Schaefer is the one defenseman you want to have if you're going to have more, or something like that. But the kid is worth watching. Worth watching.
He's the real deal, that's for sure. And after the draft, I know that the whole hockey world was rooting for him. So, everybody's watching.
But he's a nice kid. That's the thing is, he's just naturally nice.
Yes.
And I wish I was there now, because I was there when they drafted John Tavares in Montreal. And I was there to cover it because we were doing the Islanders. And I'll never forget that once they drafted him, they brought him right into our studio, which was right off the main part of the draft. And I decided that I wanted to loosen up Tavares. He never met me before, blah, blah, blah. And as soon as he sat down, I said, John, before you get to the interview, I want to tell you a joke, which I did. And it was one of my better jokes, but he didn't think it was funny. And from that point on, I knew that this guy was going to be a tough interview. Not a very tough interview, but how he couldn't like that joke, I'll never know. I forgot the gag now. I don't even remember. I think he made me forget it.
As I said, the Islanders just better hope that Schaefer doesn't have any pictures of him sleeping in a pair of maple leaf pajamas.
You'll never forget that, Joe. And it's amazing because what the Toronto people, of course, the Toronto fans like Alena, they love the guy, and good for them for loving him. but my son Simon is in the Avid Island. And, we don't forgive this guy. We considered it. Well, Joe, you could say we considered it a first class double cross.
Well, you know what? To his credit, I think he's a very underrated player.
Absolutely.
I think he's one of the most underrated players in the last 10 years. He makes so many people better around him. I mean, when he was on the Islanders, Matt Molson suddenly became like a 30 goal scorer. I think he makes the Maple Leafs a much better team. You know, the fact that he went to the Maple Leafs, of course, rubbed a lot of Islander fans the wrong way, but he is a terrific player.
Just reached his 500 goals, right? And last game.
Yes, he did. That's true.
Joe, I beg to differ. I never thought that he was a great captain or even a great player on the Islanders. I thought that he was a very good player as opposed to a great or a superstar. Okay? So he goes to Toronto. We'll forget about whether it was a double cross or not. He goes to Toronto, and he's supposed to be the guy who makes him a cup winner. So he goes to Toronto. I don't think he won the cup in the first year he was there. I don't think he won the cup in the second year, or the third, or the fourth, and they still haven't won the cup. Now, I go back to the amount of dough that this guy got when he went to Toronto. He was supposed to be the guy with the other bunch, Matthews and Mon and blah blah blah, to turn them into a cup team. And I look at him as a Maple Leaf, just as he was, as Joe pointed out, he maybe made guys better, but not better enough. Okay? And he had one great goal as an Islander. We don't deny that. We didn't want him to go. We didn't want him to go, and that's why I got scars here from his going. But how great he was, I think he was. I would put him in the overrated class.
Does he still get the devil's treatment in Long Island when he returns?
They
Yeah,
haven't
because
forgot.
huh? What?
They haven't forgot.
Yeah,
They
we
haven't.
hate him.
Yeah.
Hate him. Why kid around? Why beat around the bush?
Yeah.
He did not have to do it the way he did it. He knew where the heck he was going, that he loves Toronto, and good, love Toronto. You're born there, you learn your hockey there, but give the Islanders a break. The Islanders drafted for him. Let us know you're going to go so we could trade him and get somebody. As we say in Yiddish, we got garnished for this guy. Garnished is what the hole is in a donut. That's what we got for him. And it hurt the team. And credit to Lou Lamoriello, always a gentleman, and the organization. They wound up with, what's it called? Addition by subtraction.
Yes.
We were just as good, if not better, without this guy.
Absolutely. That was a great year. Those last couple years at the Coliseum, they were pretty spectacular. I know this new arena and everything like that is good, but I don't know, that Coliseum had a way to rock that I haven't seen many rinks in the NHL rock like.
You know what the Coliseum learned from, Joe? The Coliseum learned from the Long Island Arena, except this was a large version. Not quite as crazy, but there was nothing like it. I'll tell you a story. When the Islanders came into the league, Clarence Campbell was the president, and he always made it his business to, check out. And he came to the Coliseum before the opening game, and he looked around and he looked around, and you know what he said? This is the best arena in the NHL.
The sightlines were fabulous. You could be anywhere in that rink, and you felt you were right in the action.
Right. You're right on top of it. Right on top of it. But, the franchise had to be saved from Kansas City, and it was this close. And if it wasn't for Charlie Wang coming along and saving the team,
Mhm.
then they would have been gone. And of course, the Coliseum would have been turned into a used car lot or something like that. So, and then Charlie Wong sold it to Decky and Malkin, and these guys are great. These are great
Yes, they
owners.
are.
And the UBS was designed to be as close in a luxury way, a luxurious way, as the Coliseum in terms of the sound and and all that. And it's a great arena. As a matter of fact, my buddy Sean McCaffrey, who does a Ranger newsletter called Blue Collar, what is it? Blue Collar Blue Shirt. And he just wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago where he said, and Ranger fans hate the Islanders, right? Now the
Yes.
fans hate the Rangers. But he said, as passionate a Ranger fan as he is, he said that UBS is the best arena in the league.
The parking's a bit of a nightmare.
I didn't say it was the best. I didn't say it was. He said it. Now, the fact of the matter is, you can get there by the Long Island Railroad because there's a station right there. But
I've taken that. It's a little better, but it's still not good.
okay.
So, Joe, what are you up to these days? What are you writing? Who you're writing for? What do you do to keep yourself busy?
Well, as I said, I got a book signing. I'm still a little bit of a school teacher. I'll go in and do leave replacement for that because that was my real career, was as a school teacher, and I enjoy that. I have a fun time with that, and I actually contacted Willie O'Ree and about writing a children's book. So I have to talk to him again and find out if he still might be up for that, because I read the introduction to his book about how Jerome Iginla first met him, and I thought to myself, this might make a very good children's book.
Oh,
So we'll
awesome.
see.
I think, and in all fairness, just like Teabag is a 2-book author, you did another book. You did a wonderful book about a minor league player who played at a Long Island arena. So tell them about Buzzy DeChamps' book. That's a great book.
Yeah, as I said, Buzzy was a 57 goal scorer for the Ducks, but what made his career interesting beyond the minor leagues, of course, is that afterwards he, of course, ended up being an executive for Coho, the stick company, and there along the ways, all the trainers had some great things to say about Buzzy and what a great guy he was, and players too who he met along the way. It was his idea actually to have the blue puck for the young kids, because he said he was at a little league game and the baseball was a little bit lighter for the young little leaguers. And someone who was standing next to him said, they should do something like that for hockey. And of course, he went back to his company and says, see if you can make the pucks a little bit lighter for the kids and we'll make them blue. And he says, I never really patented it, but it's good for the game. So Buzzy gets a lot of credit for some of the stuff that he's done. In fact, Buzzy, of course, has, as I said, he knows everybody. I had John Brophy's jersey from the Ducks time, and Al Barron was just getting rid of all the old Ducks stuff. And John Brophy's one that I took off the heap, of course. And Buzzy has connections with the Hockey Hall of Fame. So that's what I donated. It was just sitting in my closet. Let me donate it to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And Craig Campbell was very happy to get that. And that's where Brophy's jersey sits right now in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
You got to tell them about the title of the Buzzy book. It's a great
Stick
title.
in the Window.
Explain it.
Brian Trottier and him were good friends, and they were at a hockey camp together for young children. And Buzzy mentioned to him, the window on my hockey life is closing. And Brian hands him a stub of a stick and says, stick this in the window and keep that window open. You got to keep going. So that's where we got the title, The Stick in the Window.
But I want to hear from my friend Teabag, what about the Canucks? I want to know, are they going to die? Are they going to be good? What? Tell us in a few minutes.
Well, they've got 9 players on the injured list right now. Brock Besser just went down on the first shift of the last game, but they managed to pull out a win in a shootout against St. Louis, and who's no pushover. And tonight they play Minnesota, who's off to a bit of a slow start. So the players that they're plugging in, the rookies and these American leaguers, the Canucks farm team won the Calder Cup last year. So they have some good players on the farm that they brought up. And if we can weather this storm and get the ship corrected again, and then I think we can still make the playoffs. So they're not going to be a powerhouse. They're going to be a borderline playoff team. But if Thatcher Demko can get back to his Vezina form, which he seems to be doing, so we'll put our hopes and faith in him. So, yeah, go Canucks.
Here's the world's fastest doctor joke. I will close the show with the world's fastest doctor joke. Nurse goes into the doctor's office, says the invisible man is outside. Doctor says, tell him I can't see him today.
There we go. I'll use that one in school.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you, May, for suggesting me, and really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
My
Thanks, Joe.
pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us on Bottle Rockets. Thank you, Maeve, Jerry. See you guys next week.